Hello everyone, my name is Jack Sullivan. These days, I'm just a retired old man, living a quiet life in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, with my wife and grandkids. But 20 years ago, I was a firefighter at Station 73 Inches Silver Creek, a small town tucked away in the sprawling pine forests of Oregon. In my 25 years on the job, I saw things you can't imagine. Buildings collapsing like dominoes, infernos that swallowed everything in their path, and life or death moments where the line between living and dying was as thin as a razor's edge. I got used to fear. Adrenaline was our constant companion. But there was one call, just a single call out of the thousands I took that still haunts me to this day. It happened on a cold night in October of 2005. A crisp autumn night with a sky full of stars. It was a night that should have been peaceful, but then the alarm bells rang, and the address that flashed on the screen made all of us, even the most seasoned firefighters, fall silent for a moment. The Blackwood Manor. It wasn't just a fire. It was an encounter with something far older and more terrifying than the most vicious flames, and it changed me forever. Tonight, I'm gonna tell you that story. The story of what we really found inside the Blackwood Manor. The wail of Engine 73's siren echoed through the quiet night of Silver Creek. Red and blue lights flashed across the roadside trees, casting eerie, dancing shadows. Inside the cab, the tension was thick. I sat next to Mike, a young rookie who couldn't hide the anxiety on his face. Dave was behind the wheel, his hands steady, while our commander, Captain Miller, sat in the passenger seat, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Listen up, everyone," Captain Miller said over the headset radio, his voice low and firm. "Blackwood Manor. The building's been abandoned for at least 50 years. The structure is unstable, so be extremely careful. Priority 1 is to control the perimeter. No one goes inside until I give the stay. Order. Copy? Copy!" We all replied in unison. The Blackwood Manor sat on a hill at the edge of town, shrouded by old oak trees and a rusted iron fence. The townspeople always told ghost stories about it. They said the Blackwood family, the original owners, had mysteriously disappeared in the early 20th century after a devastating fire, leaving behind a young daughter who was believed to have died in the blaze. Ever since, the rumor said, the little girl's spirit still wandered the house, weeping for her fate. Of course, we were firefighters. We believed in what we could see and touch, in science and in our training. Those folktales were just stories to scare kids. As Engine 73 turned onto the dirt road leading up to the manor, the sight ahead took our breath away. The Blackwood Manor stood grimly on the hilltop, a classic Victorian structure with sharp spires that clawed at the night sky. The fire wasn't as big as I'd expected. It was concentrated on the second floor, with orange flames licking at the broken window frames, sending thick plumes of black smoke curling into the sky. The scene was both tragic and strangely beautiful. We deployed quickly. Mike and I were tasked with pulling the main attack line to the front door, while other crews fanned out to assess the situation from different angles. The heat from the fire washed over my face, but there was something else in the air. A blast of cold, so unnaturally cold, it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I shivered, telling myself it was just the night wind. "Ready, Jack!" Mike yelled over the roar of the water pump. "Ready!" I shouted back. Captain Miller gave the signal. We busted the front door open with an axe. The heavy oak door crashed inwards, the sound echoing through the empty house. A thick wall of black smoke billowed out, obscuring our vision. We put on our air masks, switched on the flashlights on our helmets, and cautiously stepped inside. The space inside was vast, a grand foyer with a sweeping double staircase leading to the upper floor. The furniture was covered in dusty, yellowed white sheets. The acrid smell of smoke mingled with the musty, rotten scent of a place long forgotten. Above us, the crackling of the fire and the splintering of wood filled the oppressive air. "Alpha Team, report." Captain Miller's voice crackled in our ears. "Captain, this is Jack. We're in the main foyer. Heavy smoke, but no fire on the first floor. We're proceeding to sweep the area," I reported. "Copy that, Jack. Be careful. This building could come down at any moment." Mike and I split up, moving along opposite walls, our flashlights cutting through the ghosts of a glorious past. Covered portraits, crystal chandeliers thick with cobwebs, and floorboards that creaked with every step. The silence on this ground floor was a stark contrast to the chaos of the fire above, and it was the silence that put me on edge. And then, I heard it. At first it was faint, almost lost beneath the sound of my own breathing in the mask. A weak sound. I stopped, signaling for Mike to be quiet. We stood motionless, listening. A sob. It was the sound of a child crying. Unmistakable. A heartbroken, painful cry, echoing from somewhere in the darkness ahead. My heart hammered against my ribs. Firefighters are trained to prioritize rescue. Someone was inside. Mike, did you hear that? I whispered into the radio. Yeah, I hear it. His voice trembled. It sounds like a kid. We forgot every rule about moving in pairs. Our professional instincts took over. We followed the sound, moving deeper into the manor. The crying seemed to come from a small room under the staircase. The door was locked. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Is anyone in there? Fire department, call out! I yelled. The crying stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was even more terrifying than the sound itself. The air seemed to thicken. The cold I'd felt outside was now even, more intense, a bone-chilling, unnatural cold that seeped through my heavy turnout gear. Alpha Team, what's your status? Captain Miller asked. Captain, we heard a child crying. We think someone might be trapped in here, I reported, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the line. Jack, that's impossible. The building was confirmed empty. It's probably just the wind or the structure settling. Get back to the primary objective. The fire on the second floor is the priority. The captain's voice was cut off by another sound, a slow, rhythmic creak from the top of the stairs. Mike and I both looked up. Our flashlights pierced the thick smoke at the landing. Through the hazy smoke, we saw a wooden rocking chair. It was rocking by itself, back and forth, in a steady rhythm, as if someone invisible was sitting there, calmly watching us from the shadows. A chill ran down my spine. That was the only way I could describe it. The rocking chair kept moving, its rhythmic creaking a misplaced and horrifying sound in the middle of the chaotic fire. Mike and I looked at each other, our eyes wide behind the glass of our masks. The firefighter's logic in my head screamed that it was just a coincidence, a draft, a vibration in the floorboards. But a deep instinct told me something was terribly wrong. It's probably just a weak structure, Mike stammered, his voice trying and failing to sound calm. Forget it, I said, though my heart was still pounding. We have a job to do. Captain's orders are to assist on the second floor. We forced ourselves to push the haunting image from our minds and started up the stairs. Every step on the rotting wood was a gamble. The heat grew more intense, the air so thick you could almost feel its weight. The scene on the second floor was like something out of hell. Fire engulfed the hallway, racing along the ancient peeling wallpaper, charring it black. We need to find the source of the fire, I yelled to Mike over the roar of the flames. Check the rooms! We worked mechanically, following the procedures drilled into us through hundreds of hours of training. Break down doors, spray water, check for hot spots. But in my mind, the image of the rocking chair and the sound of the child's cries kept replaying. As we moved further down the hall, we passed a room with its door slightly ajar. Strangely, it was almost untouched by the fire. Most of the other rooms were either gutted or fully ablaze, but this one seemed to be protected by some invisible force. Curious, I pushed the door open and stepped inside, with Mike right behind me. It was a child's bedroom. Everything inside was eerily preserved, covered only by a thin layer of soot. A small iron-framed bed, a white wooden wardrobe, and in the middle of the room, a dusty wooden rocking horse. On the floor, a porcelain doll lay face down, its blonde hair tangled, its white lace dress smudged with grime. An overwhelming sadness filled the room, heavy and palpable. It felt as if time had stopped here, and then the roar of the fire outside suddenly muffled, as if someone had turned down the world's volume. In that sudden moment of quiet, a new sound emerged. It wasn't crying. This time, it was a melody, a soft, humming lullaby, clear and ethereal, like the sound from an old music box. The tune was beautiful, but hearing it in a place like this, at a time like this, made it utterly terrifying. The melody seemed to come from the darkest corner of the room, a spot our flashlights couldn't fully penetrate. "Jack, what is that?" Mike whispered, his voice cracking with fear. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was mesmerized by the tune. I slowly raised my flashlight and pointed it directly into the corner. For a brief moment, just a single moment, but one that has burned into my memory forever, I saw her. A faint, shimmering outline of a little girl, about 6 or 7 years old, wearing a white nightgown, was standing in the corner. She had no clear features, just a translucent figure that almost blended with the air, but I could feel her eyes staring at us. The lullaby seemed to be coming from her. The instant I blinked, the figure vanished. The melody stopped. The roar of the fire returned, louder than before. "Did you see that?" Mike yelled, stumbling backward over the rocking horse. "Jack, did you see that little girl?" I saw her," I stammered, my throat completely dry. Just then, our radios erupted with a burst of static, followed by Captain Miller's frantic voice. "Fall back! All teams, fall back now! The roof is about to collapse!" I repeat, fall back! His warning came too late. The floor beneath us shook violently. A terrifying groan echoed through the house as a large section of the ceiling and roof above the hallway came crashing down. A wall of fire and flaming debris separated me from Mike. The force of the blast threw me backward, slamming me against the wall. My air mask was knocked sideways, and a wave of superheated smoke flooded my lungs. I coughed violently, my vision blurring. My world was a chaotic mess of fire, smoke, and the sound of destruction. I was cut off, completely alone, and in that chaos, as I struggled to get my bearings, I heard it, as clearly as if someone was standing right next to me, whispering in my ear. A child's voice, trembling and desperate. "Help me." It wasn't an echo, not a hallucination from oxygen deprivation. It was a plea, a painful whisper that cut through the roar of the fire, through my helmet, and pierced straight into my soul. An overwhelming terror seized me. This wasn't the fear of fire or a collapsing building. This was a primal fear, a fear of something I couldn't see, couldn't fight, and couldn't understand. I struggled helplessly, trying to get up, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. The whisper kept echoing in my head. "Help me." Just when I thought the flames were about to consume me, a strong hand grabbed my shoulder and pulled me up. It was Captain Miller, his face covered in soot, but his eyes still determined. "Let's go, Sullivan. We have to get out of here." He and Dave had found a way around the debris to get to me. They helped me out of that haunted room, through the fiery hallway, and down the stairs. Mike had been found by another crew on the other side of the collapse, shaken but miraculously not seriously injured. As we stumbled outside into the cool night air, I looked back at the manor. The fire had now engulfed the entire structure, turning it into a giant torch on the hilltop. It looked like a dying beast, writhing in agony. The fire was finally extinguished as dawn began to break. The Blackwood Manor was now just a blackened, skeletal ruin, smoldering in the morning light. The subsequent investigation concluded that the fire was started by a group of homeless teens who had broken in and carelessly lit a fire for warmth. No bodies were ever found. The official report stated that the building was, as predicted, completely empty. Back at the station, Mike and I tried to explain what we had seen and heard to Captain Miller. We told him about the crying, the rocking chair, the lullaby, and the apparition of the little girl in the bedroom. I even told him about the whisper, "Help me." Captain Miller, a practical and tough man, listened patiently. He didn't laugh at us. Instead, he looked at us with a thoughtful expression. He then told us more details about the legend of the Blackwood Manor. The family had a youngest daughter named Lily. In the fire that happened nearly a century ago, everyone's bodies were recovered except for Lily's. It was assumed the fire had been so intense that it had completely consumed her. The room we had entered was her old bedroom. Sometimes, in a fire, Captain Miller said, his voice low, the smoke, the heat, and the stress can play tricks on your mind. Write what's necessary in the report. As for the rest, maybe it's best we keep it to ourselves. I tried to follow his advice. I tried to convince myself it was all a hallucination, but I couldn't. And the worst part was, the story didn't end there. The horror of the Blackwood Manor followed me home. A few weeks after the fire, strange things started happening in my own house. It began with small things. I'd hear a faint lullaby, drifting from somewhere distant in the house in the middle of the night. I blamed it on the neighbors, or my own imagination. Then, sometimes, while watching TV, I'd get the feeling that someone was standing in the doorway of the living room, just out of the corner of my eye. When I turned to look, no one was there. The real fear set in when my daughter Sarah, who was only 5 at the time, started talking about a new friend. One evening, as I was reading her a bedtime story, she suddenly said, "Daddy, Lily says she likes your voice." My heart stopped. I tried to stay calm. "Lily? Who's Lily, sweetheart?" "She's my new friend," Sarah replied innocently. "She comes to play with me at night. She sings to me, but she's sad. She says she's lost and can't find her mommy." An icy dread washed over me. I looked around my daughter's room, a knot of fear tightening in my chest. The lullaby. A little girl named Lily, lost in a fire. It all connected in a perfect, horrifying way. The breaking point came one night when I woke up around 3 a.m. for a drink of water. As I passed Sarah's room, I heard her talking. I pushed the door open a crack and peeked in. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting a pale light on the floor. Sarah was sitting up in her bed, and she was talking to Steve, the empty space at the foot of her bed. "It's okay, Lily," she whispered. "My daddy's a fireman. He'll help you. He's very brave." And in the shadows at the end of the bed, for a split second, I swear I saw it. A faint, small outline, the shape of a child sitting there, listening to myself. "Daughter." I slammed the door and ran back to my room, my heart racing. I wasn't afraid for myself. I was afraid for my daughter. That spirit, whatever it was, had followed me from that manor and was now in my house, with my child. It was a kind of terror no fire could ever match, an enemy I had no idea how to fight. Those phenomena lasted for a few months, and then, just as mysteriously as they had started, they faded away. Maybe Lily's spirit finally found peace, or maybe she simply moved on. I don't know. But the experience left a permanent scar on my soul. I never saw the world the same way again. A few years after that, I took an early retirement. I couldn't keep doing the job when every time I walked into a burning building, I was terrified I would hear another whisper in the dark. Sometimes, I still drive by the hill where the manor once stood. It's just an empty, overgrown lot now. But I know, and I will never forget, what was hidden inside it that night. Thank you all for listening. Be careful what hides in the smoke and fire, because sometimes the scariest things aren't the flames you can see, but the whispers that only you can hear in the dark. Have a safe night.